Spirit of life, come unto me, come unto me. Up from the ocean depths they rose, measuring the height in centimeters over eons. The volcanic eruptions crested the surface, solidified, and stayed put. And today this chain of islands holds the tallest structure on Earth when measuring from the seafloor, Mauna Kea. In the faith of this land, it was Wakea, the father, the sky god, along with Papa, the mother, and earth god, who brought these lands up into existence, who created a place that can feed and clothe and shelter all of their children, children conceived where the peak of Mauna Kea touches the sky, and the children of the land, Keiki o Ka'aina, are tethered by blood to the land. For Papa and Wakea, after bringing these lands forth, brought forth a child, Ho'ohokalani, the beautiful and caring child of the creators of this land. Then she herself bore a child for the first time, Haloa. Haloa did not survive childbirth, and his mother, Ho'ohokalani, buried her child Haloa in the Aina. Then for a long time, Ho'ohokalani wept. Out from her eyes poured the tears of a grieving mother. Out from her eyes poured the tears of pain and loss and inconsolable heartache. They poured and they poured until, watered by all those tears, up from the Aina sprouted a small green shoot. And then the small green shoot grew into a sturdy plant. And the large leaves swayed with the breeze of the land, while collecting nourishing water and spreading by being replanted and replanted. And in this time, Ho'ohokalani had another child, Haloa, named after his brother, whom we call now Haloanaka. And Haloa was the first Hawaiian, sibling to the plant we call kalo today, and all Hawaiians are said to be related by blood both to Haloa, the second sibling, and Haloanaka, the first sibling, whose life-giving earthly body, reborn from the Aina, nourishes his siblings to this very day. Spirit of life, come unto me, come unto me. This month we're going to church, friends, because this month the theme is one that is at the heart of many of the faiths in this world, and at the heart of many of the ways of believing or living that do not claim a particular faith or system of belief: resurrection or Alaho'ana. Hawaiian linguists believe that Alaho'ana was a created word. When the Jewish and Christian scriptures were translated into Alelo Hawaii, and it was an important word to have for those purposes. Many know that in the Christian faith, resurrection, the rising from actual death we heard about in Martina's reading, is central to the beliefs of that faith. In fact, the Creed, recited by many Orthodox Christians, recited by me through my whole childhood, throughout the world contains the statement of belief both that Jesus rose from the dead on the third day and the belief in the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. Amen. I'm guessing some of you might remember some of that from your childhoods or from other parts of your life. Some of you may still recite and believe elements of that creed, but it was to accomplish translations of words in works like these that led to the creation of some new words in Alelo Hawaii. Many saw this as giving new life to a language in a new setting. And I get that. Indeed, there are many, many people in the Hawaiian communities on this island who are devoutly and decidedly Christian or other faiths. And yet the beliefs of the primal faith of these lands, the Hawaiian faith, are still part of the way that those same people see and understand the world. And I get that too. Anyone who's ever come to me for pastoral care and has said that they are confused or troubled or conflicted between two things has probably heard me tell them, you're allowed to feel two things at the same time. And so it is the same with faith and belief, friends. You're allowed to believe two things at the same time. And I am grateful for that, I can tell you. The theme of resurrection this month in March, the month preceding the month that contains the celebration of Easter, was intentionally chosen by your worship team to take place this month and not next month. This was not to thumb any spiritual noses at Easter. No, it was to remind us all of the ways that the seasons and the way those seasons turn and change and bring about new life in the world are really at the center of many faiths. This month we will celebrate the equinox once more, when the hours and the days and the nights are balanced, and then we will balance our own congregation once again by adding new members to our midst yet again in our community. And with this equinox later in the month comes the beginning of what many call the season of spring, when the tiny green shoots come forth once more from the earth, when good old-fashioned fertility festivals were celebrated all over the earth, all through so much of human history in so many fun and beautiful and sexy, yeah, I said it, and magical ways. And we get it. It is in us. Yes, we're looking at resurrection this month, friends. Resurrection comes from the old Latin resurgere, which looks like the word resurge, which kind of sounds like the name of a low-budget caffeine energy drink. Right, Stuart? Resurgere turned into resurrectio in later Latin, and then good old-fashioned English added an N, and then we got our festival, resurrection. And that word really means to rise again, or to lift oneself up, is really what it means. Now, the less religious world that shares all of these same roots, the less religious word that shares these same roots is resurgent, which could describe a team in the second half of a game, or a tennis player down a few sets who comes back, or one side in a military confrontation. Resurgent. And right now, many of us are getting some resurgent feelings, right? A lot of us are noticing more and more of our friends and family are getting vaccinated against the virus that has been plaguing us for a year now. Honolulu is opening up ever so slightly so that restaurants and other establishments can allow more people inside of them. And more tourists are coming to arrive in these lands, giving new life to an industry that, I know, could certainly use some attention in the way it's managed, yet nevertheless supplies a lot of the tax base these islands depend upon, at least for now. But ways of life, old ways of being, are not only coming back here in these lands. On the continent, we are seeing something else, something a little sinister, rolling across the landscape of many states. We're seeing a rollout in state legislatures of the most restrictive barriers to voting this nation has seen since the passage of Jim Crow laws. If you didn't know this, you should, friends, because the Brennan Center for Justice reports that 43 states have introduced more than 250 bills restricting access to voting in state legislatures since February, and the number is growing. This is in comparison to just 15 states introducing 35 bills in a total of all of 2020 state sessions of legislatures. That's a big difference, but it's not a big mystery why state legislatures are doing this. Under the guise of voter fraud protection or deterrence, these legislatures saw what happened in Georgia. They saw what the organizers there, Stacey Abrams, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, Latasha Brown, and Inse Ufut, accomplished. Not to mention the legion of persons of color who took the time, braved the challenges of that state's voting rules, and got their vote in. They brought about a kind of change Georgia has not seen in decades. Oh, you better believe that those state legislatures across the nation who depend on keeping power by keeping voter turnout, especially among people of color, low, took one look at Georgia and said, we get it. And the rules being advanced in Georgia include laws strictly limiting voting on Sundays, one of the primary times voters of color vote because they cannot, many of them, take off time from work to vote. and it targets polls in densely populated areas where there are often very long lines to vote and where many people of color live by doing what? By prohibiting free food and drink from being served to people waiting in line to vote. The resurgence of the power of the vote to change the course of a nation is bringing to life again the hearts and the minds of those most disparately impacted by the laws of a nation, the policies, the practices, and the attitudes of some parts of a nation that claim to wrap themselves in the cloak of democracy, but wear instead only a death shroud for justice. For it was on this very day, March 7th, 1965, when 600 people tried to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge on the way from Selma to Montgomery, and when state troopers, and it wasn't just state troopers had earlier deputized any white man over the age of 21 who cared to be deputized. So these troopers and their, quote, deputies, who were deputized that morning, violently attacked the participants in the peaceful march for voting rights led by the late John Lewis. These new laws seem more sophisticated than many of the Jim Crow era laws like literacy tests. And Reverend Dr. William Barber II said that Jim Crow went to law school, and now everyone is meeting Mr. James Crow, Esquire. He's a little dolled up, but no one is fooling anyone at all. And I get it, friends, and I bet you do too. Now, as it happens, the new feeling of changing the tide of voting rights here on this anniversary isn't only giving rise to more restrictive voting rights laws. Legislators in 37 states have introduced, wait for it, 541 bills that would expand voting rights in states. These are meant to expand mail-in ballots, to automatically register persons when they receive a driver's license or other state ID, and to increase the use of drop boxes and other measures meant to increase access to voting. Now, the opposition to some of these is really the height of hypocrisy. My personal favorite is the good old-fashioned voter ID laws that many are trying to get passed. Now, I have so many friends who say, what's the big deal? You just use your license. Yeah, you do. But you have legislators in some states who want voter ID laws, which inherently disenfranchise low-income persons who in this nation are disproportionately persons of color, because many low-income persons don't drive or have had their licenses revoked or suspended for failure to pay ridiculous fines that don't have the money to get the ID back. To give you a sense, in the US, wait for it, 25% of voting age people who identify as Black or African American do not have a current government-issued ID. The active word there is current. Many are not current because of these ridiculous fines that prevent renewal of the license. And in North Dakota alone, 19% of First Nations members do not have a current government-issued ID. But when offered a solution to register voters at the very time they are receiving the very ID these legislators say they should have, called automatic registration, that measure is being opposed. Friends, you know, I do try to see many sides and views of a lot of things in many of our lives, but that is almost laughable to me. How can you hold your head up high? If you are wondering what the big fights in state legislatures will be in the coming year, it's going to be over voting rights. And those of you who lived through that fight 6 decades ago must be wondering what the heck is going on. It's enough to make you lose your mind. It's enough to make you mad. It's enough to make you cry, and I get it. Crying is probably a healthy response. It's the response that nourished the children of this land, the siblings of Haloa, the sacred lives of those whose past and whose destiny is tied to these lands. How a land is kept, how it is cared for, how its people are nourished is all part of the ways that this island supports those who live there, and is part of the way that resurrection, resurgence is in the heart of these lands. We are witnessing the resurrection of policies and laws that barely seek to hide their racist intent and hope for a racist outcome. And we are also witnessing the resurrection of a spirit of life that will not stand for it anymore, that will walk the miles, cross the bridges, and face the opposition that seeks so desperately, so violently to cling to an old way of life. In our own reading today, we heard that we must be prepared to do, or what we must be prepared to do when we want to welcome new life, new ways of being in our lives. Kelly Chirpchuk's words: you have to sit through the long, dark night to see the first light of morning, to feel the sharp intake of breath as the sky's closed eye, cold and gray, cracks open slowly. Then with growing determination, this is what you must do to experience resurrection. To know what it really means to feel the new life that is coming into being, we sit at times with the mourning of a mother whose firstborn son is gone, pouring out our pain through the night, and seeing at last a morning when the first green shoot of life comes back into the world, up from the earth, the land, the Aina, so that we can hear the stories from the mouths of the children of this Aina about the trouble that might be around us, created by beings we may not be able to see, to change, or even to affect, that threaten to tear at the landscape of justice we all yearn to see. It can feel so discouraging, friends. I get it. Yet every morning, we get up. We can look at the world, at the racism, the classism, opportunism, and other forms of oppression we see in the world and say, I get it. Every morning, we get up and we look at the way the siblings of this Aina are treated, are forgotten, are imprisoned, and say, I get it. And every morning, we get up. And we look at the utter, heart-changing beauty of a place we are blessed to reside. And we must remember that it was only out of the deepest pain of loss that the surpassing beauty of the Spirit of life in these lands was born again. That first resurrection in this place nourished an outpouring of love, and that teaches us to deepen the love we have for all of our siblings, and the love we must have for ourselves in these times. For resurrection to be real, to be felt, we endure the time of pain, of loss, of missing the love we thought we had. We witness a resurgence of tactics and strategies that divide in ways that are unkind, unloving, and I say unholy. Or maybe we just feel lost or sad or alone. But in the morning, under the cracking sky that opens with nourishing rain, from the deepest soil of our being, we rise again, resurgent in the knowledge of an ancient, growing, vibrant love. A deeper love than even we thought we deserved. And we hold to that love as the root of all we do in our lives. We are made for so much loving, friends. We are made for so much joy. And every morning, every day, we have the chance, even in the face of the worst adversities we can conjure, to bend low, to thank the earth for the blessing it brings forth once again, and to take hold of the love we want to bring into the world, so that maybe at last an aching world might see that love, might know it, and say to us, I get it. And may it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen.